Humans are actual animals. In 3rd grade, my teacher, Mrs. Hibbish, assigned the class to write a brief essay answering the following question. If you could be any animal, what animal would you be? This was my response. That is a stupid question. What a stupid question that is. If I could be any animal, I would be the animal that I already am, a human. Why would any human want to be any animal other than a human? That doesn't make any sense. That is a stupid question. The next morning, I handed in the essay. Later that day, Mrs. Hibbish pulled me aside. She crouched down to my level and looked me straight in the eye. At that moment, I observed an imperfection about my teacher that I'd never noticed before. Her irides were 2 different colors. One was a grayish blue, and the other hazel, with flecks of gold. I read your essay, Mrs. Hibbish said, and Graham, I'm concerned. Why? Why do you think? I told her I didn't know, because I honestly didn't. I had answered the question truthfully and in essay form as instructed. What was the problem? When the final bell rang later that afternoon, Mrs. Hibbish sent me home with a letter addressed to my mother requesting a parent-teacher meeting for later that week. Oh, what did you do this time? My mother asked upon reading the note. I don't know, she wouldn't say. Well, you must have done something. My mother crumpled up the note and tossed it into the wastebasket. I'll cancel my hair appointment. That Thursday, she met Mrs. Hibbish in the classroom after school. I was told to wait outside in the hall. A lazy-eyed custodian armed with a push broom lumbered down the long and lonely corridor, a ring of keys jingling from his hip. From the door I listened as Mrs. Hibbish explained to my mother about the assignment, then presented her with the essay I'd written. My mother read it once, and upon finishing it, proceeded to laugh. So what's the problem? She chuckled. Aside from being somewhat wordy, I think it's quite funny. But Mrs. Hibbish felt otherwise. Graham is the only student who said he wanted to be a human. All the other students said they wanted to be actual animals. But humans are actual animals. One student said she wanted to be a blowfish, Mrs. Hibbish continued, disregarding my mother's comment. Another student said he wanted to be an elephant, and another, a duck-billed platypus. Do you see where I'm going with this? My mother thought for a moment, then said, No, I'm afraid I don't. Mrs. Hibbish let out a heavy sigh. I'm a bit perturbed is all. About what? He enjoys being a human. What's the big deal? Frankly, if I were you, I'd be more perturbed about the little girl who wants to be a goddamn blowfish. I mean, what's that all about? Mrs. Hibbish shook her head. Oh, Mrs. Gremore, there's really no need for that kind of language here. On the car ride home, I asked my mother why Mrs. Hibbish was so concerned about my desire to be a human. It was raining outside. Heavy sheets of water whipped against the windshield, faster than the wipers could whisk them away. I don't know, my mother replied. Some people are just idiots. But Mrs. Hibbish is a grown-up. And Mrs. Hibbish is a goddamn idiot, my mother said, flipping on the blinker and switching lanes as we zipped down the soggy interstate and back into real life.